Hey y'all, it's Jess. Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. I'm standing outside my garden and we haven't done a full garden tour in several weeks now. It is the first week of September here in Zone 7B, Central Arkansas. Our garden right now is like right in between the two seasons. We really get to plant like two waves of the garden with our long growing season. We get to plant what we call like the spring and summer garden and then the fall garden. And right now, I feel like there's not just a whole lot to look at, but I do recognize that there is actually quite a bit going on in the garden. And I wanted to share with you guys what it looks like in the in-between. So let's go take a look. The first thing we have to look at here is all around the greenhouse. Our elephant ears have grown up lovely. This pineapple sage is absolutely beautiful. The zinnias, these kind of got lanky and they're all laying over. They were really at their prime a few weeks ago. I've got a lot of my containers here emptied out. These grow bags are emptied out. A lot of my Greenstalk planters are emptied. And I'm planning on planting maybe pansies or something that can handle the cold in these for the winter. Of course, we have our irrigation project midway, so we've got stuff everywhere, and we have not like reclaimed the greenhouse yet. Of course, that's gonna be on the list to come in and just like clean all this out and make this a functional space. It's not functional right now, not because it's a mess, but because it's, you know, it's evening and just now cooling off to 100 degrees in there. Now our plan for the greenhouse over the winter is to use a small space heater. It's very, very well insulated, and we didn't finish it until February of this year, so I didn't really get to use it very much during the cold weather. However, what I did find was that it was well insulated enough that even during some pretty cool temperatures, a small space heater was able to keep it very warm. So I'm really looking forward to experimenting with what I can grow in the greenhouse this winter. I'm thinking of doing probably a good deal of salad greens and some things like that in there where I can keep the pests away easily. I don't know, it's just gonna have it's gonna be nice to have a place that I can just kind of get away to and be in the company of growing things. Now this bed, I actually largely weeded today. There's still a little bit left. I've got some coleus here that has obviously gone to seed, as well as some of these Redmond cactus zinnias. This trellis, along with most of the arch trellises, once the things that are currently on them finish, like I've still got a melon over there, but once that's done, this is just gonna come down. We don't normally take the trellises down every year. Like last year, we moved a couple of them, but for the most part, they stayed the same. However, I'm wanting to switch things up. I get asked a lot about crop rotation in a raised bed garden like this, and there are really varying opinions on whether crop rotation is something that is fully necessary. I really love learning from Charles Dowding, and of course I've learned a lot from Paul at Back to Eden Gardening, and both of them state that if you have healthy soil, you don't need to rely on crop rotation to keep your plants healthy. Of course, if you've been with me through the summer, you know that my tomatoes got sick. I've lost my tomatoes to disease every year by August, but I have talked to many, many gardeners in the area, and that is very normal for here where it's very hot and humid. So I don't know that moving them really matters. I have moved them and it hasn't made a difference in the past. But I've grown the same things in the same places for a while now, and we decided we were just gonna take the trellises down and completely reconfigure them next year. So that is going to come down, as well as this one down here, and that will open these beds up. We already took the trellis walls down that held the tomatoes. That will open these up, and we're going to be putting row covers over some, perhaps all of the raised beds. I've already started doing some sowing here in these. My plan for these beds here in here is that they're going to be really heavy with roots. I'm thinking quite a bit of turnips, radishes, carrots in these 2 beds. Down here I still have quite a few peppers going, like this is a lemon drop pot pepper. Some of my peppers are kind of sickly. I'm just letting them go. Some of them are puny. They didn't do great this year, but I have got to harvest quite a bit off of them. Down here I've got a little space down on the end. I have some okra that's actually coming up on its own from where I had come up on some large okras that had gotten too big, and I cut them off and dropped them in the bed, which I do sometimes, and things will sprout. Sometimes I let them grow and sometimes I don't. I'll probably leave those alone. I don't know that they'll have time to produce anything before it gets cold, but it won't hurt to let them try. Here, this is cinnamon basil, which has gotten really tall. One way I could handle this is coming in and kind of pinching some off here at one of the forks. And I may come down and prune some of this down. It hasn't gone to seed, so it's still good and usable. Cinnamon basil is so fragrant and lovely to smell. It's very good to eat as well. It's very similar to your traditional sweet basil in part, but it has a burn to it rather than the sweetness to it, which I guess is why it has cinnamon in the name. It's definitely a spicier version of regular basil. Here I've got some spent sunflowers. Those need to go ahead and come out, as well as some beautiful canary zinnias. All the zinnias and the flowers I am leaving. Here's some more basil here, as well as some chives. I've got all these, this is grass. These are chives. And these have been harvested on quite a lot, but they're still looking good. Now any of the flowers that you see, these zinnias, the marigolds, I think I still have, I've got some dahlias about to open. I think that's about all that's left at this point. All of those are very frost tender. They're not going to live past the frost. However, they'll do fine until it frosts. Last year we didn't get frost until November the 10th. So I had these happy cheery flowers until like well into the fall. So I leave them. It's good for the pollinators to go ahead and leave those. I love having the color in the garden. I could choose to tear them out and put something that would continue growing into the winter, but I really like having them there. Here I have a golden Ginny melon. It's produced a little bit, not a lot. Now these chrysanthemum melons, as you can see, are starting, this plant is starting to get pretty crunchy and sickly. This one plant, this is just one on this side of this trellis because the others just didn't germinate well. I had the hardest time getting this going, but they have produced so much. We've probably harvested 20 of these off of this one plant, and there are still several on here right now. And it's still setting fruit even though it's sick. So the chrysanthemum melon was a pretty good hit. It's got a really mild flavor, kind of the texture of like a really ripe pear is what I would say. And they're very small, but for how much they produce, I think it's a pretty good one to consider. Here, more basil coming up. This bed needs to be weeded, and I haven't replanted anything in this yet. That's actually mustard. That must have reseeded from last winter. Obviously, I've got some peppers. A lot of these I'm gonna need to harvest. These are just a little mini red bell pepper. I always think that I should grow many things. That is not sweet. It is kind of good though. Very, very strong pepper flavor. Slightly spicy. I didn't eat any of the seeds. The problem with these kinds of things is they're so small, which whenever you're looking at a seed catalog, you think, oh, that's a good thing. But whenever you are harvesting them and cutting them up, and they're tedious and difficult, then you're like, why did I plant this? I don't know that I'll grow that one again. Of course, it's not February and I'm not shopping for seeds. I'm standing in the garden in September, and this is how it always goes with me and miniature things. Like I said, this row, I'm gonna fill in the spaces. I'm gonna do a lot of root vegetables. I will probably pull out some of the pepper plants that are on the leggier end, like harvest those red bells and probably pull that one out. Anything that I'm not absolutely loving, I'll go ahead and take the space back from it. Because with things like carrots and turnips, radishes, beets, these things, like whenever you plant them, once the cold comes, they stay okay in the ground. Now, I'm speaking for here in the south. It doesn't get that cold here. The coldest we ever get is like single digits. For those of you who are living in areas where it gets like negative 30 degrees, I don't know that this applies. Where your ground really freezes hard, our ground doesn't really freeze hard, ever. Like it's never really cold enough for the ground to be completely unworkable. But as it is here, I can plant carrots and other root vegetables, and when it gets cold, it may get cold enough for the tops to die back, but you can just leave the roots in the ground and pretty much store them there. And so I will plant a ton of carrots in these spaces, and when it gets cold, I'll mulch them over, and when I need them, I just come and pick them. Like when I'm cooking soup, I just come down and pick the carrots that I need for it and just store them outside. That's the way to do it. And because of that, I would rather take back the space from the peppers I'm not using and put carrots there, because it's just going to be a better use of my space over winter. Here, the Tulsi holy basil is as beautiful as ever, fragrant and lovely, usually covered in pollinators. It's evening now, so not so much, but usually you can come out here through the day and there are just honeybees and butterflies all over this. I've got this growing in multiple places in the garden, and it's doing really well. You can dry this for tea. The frost is going to kill that, but I leave it alone. That's a useful thing to have in the garden, and I just enjoy it so much. It smells wonderful. Now these peppers are lanky things. They are producing, and so I'm going to leave them there. I'm enjoying those. Those are the, what is this called? Chilaka. That's the Chilaka pepper. There are a few exceptions to my leave the flowers alone rule, like this marigold that's just puny and it's not doing much. Probably gonna go ahead and take that one out. My plan for this bed is cabbages, cauliflower, and broccoli. I'm gonna probably fill much of this bed. I know for sure this is one we're going to put a hoop cover over. And so where I've got flowers that aren't thriving, I'll go ahead and tear those out so that I can give as much space in this bed as possible to those cold crops. The beautiful banana tree bed, which actually has some Tabasco peppers at the bottom that are finally starting to produce. Had a lot of questions about these banana trees lately, now that they're getting so massive and majestic. As you can see, they're just way up there. People have been asking me, how do you keep those alive in the winter? And I don't. This is the first year for these to be here. My mom brought these to my house. Her friend gave them to her to give to me, and she brought them over. Now my mom has banana trees that she keeps in huge pots, and she moves them in and out of her house. She brings them in during the winter. I have not had these in the past. Now I did go visit Baker Creek and noticed that they had banana trees, so I actually asked Jer about it, and they just let theirs die back every year, and then they come back when the weather gets warm. So they never produce outside, but they do get big and beautiful. And of course the leaves can be used in cooking. I've heard people say that this is nature's aluminum foil. These are good for like roasting in and cooking in. I've even seen where, I watched a video, I think it was a video, I can't remember where I saw it, where people were taking these when they were like in their prime and they were healthy, and they were actually freezing them to use later. And I don't know for sure, I haven't tried that, but I saw it, and so I'll probably experiment with some of these before this plant dies back. Another thing is that banana trees reproduce. Like you can see here, these are all little baby banana trees coming up from this one. And so what I will likely try to do, kind of my loose plan, is to take these small ones and dig them out and pot them. And I may try to bring them in the house during the winter. It'll be a nice little bit of green. I think these I'll probably leave. Now my mom has successfully had hers make fruit before because of bringing them in and out, but with them not being able to live more than one season out here, they won't ever produce anything that we get to eat. They do produce shade though, and they are nice to look at. I didn't expect them to do this well, to be completely frank. I did not know that they were gonna get this big. I've really enjoyed having them there. So these square beds are for the most part empty. Here I've got some pretty sickly zinnias, weeds. That's not weeds, it's purslane, but still it's a weed here. A weed is just a plant growing where you don't want it. And every time I've gotten so many comments whenever I'll have video shots of weeding beds and people will see me pull out purslane and they're like, no, that's so valuable, let it grow. Purslane grows like crazy here. I could go harvest a trash bag full of purslane just out in the yard. So I don't give it space in the garden beds. It's funny because I actually have seeds for it and I'm like, I'm not gonna give this space in my garden beds. If I were to just stop weeding my garden and let it go, purslane would just fill up the beds. There's so much of it. Looks like I got a little basil coming up over here in the corner. I'll probably leave that, it'll die at the frost. Mostly though, these are empty. Lilies here, I need to weed this and mulch it. And this is my big rosemary, which that will be fine here. It doesn't get cold enough here to kill rosemary in the winter. But these others are empty. Hey, worker boy. Nice job. You helping Daddy?
Trying to help Daddy.
Trying to. Now down here on the end, the lemon balm and peppermint bed. Everything's coming back up in there, so I'll let that go. Oh, looky here. That is garlic. I must have missed a clove harvesting. So that garlic is coming up. This was garlic last year, and I'm pretty sure this year I'm gonna just go ahead and do all of these beds with garlic. I don't love the little square beds the way I love my long beds. The long beds are just a lot easier for me to plan and work out with trellises and structure and all of that. I end up planting squash in these square beds a lot, and I've done a couple other things, but my favorite thing so far to plant in them has been garlic. I love that I can put it in the fall, and then it's just in there through, you know, into midsummer. So that's my plan for these. I'm gonna have like 5 beds almost full of garlic. Jeremiah and Ben are taking down the arch trellises that don't currently have anything on them except for these. We're gonna go ahead and leave these up. There's 2 on either side of the pavilion, and I know that those aren't going anywhere next year, so we're just gonna go ahead and leave them. So I'm actually planting, or have planted, some more cucumbers and some beans on these. They're not up yet, but I'll go ahead and have these planted, and they can grow through the fall until the cold weather comes. In this bed, I've got some stuff that's volunteered, some zinnias and some borage. I'll probably come in and plug in some roots throughout here, but I'm gonna let those things grow just for some more color until. Same thing over here. Probably some leafy things and some roots in here. I've got some basil that I may go ahead and pull out. I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna do whenever it comes down to it here. It really just depends on spacing for all of the things that I have. Now in this next long bed, look how different this looks without the arches. Isn't that so wild? Of course, the snake beans, many of those are like way past harvesting. I'll get over to those for a second. I was thinking we might cut open some of the incredibly ripe ones. I'm a little scared, to be honest, but we'll get to that in a second. Here I've got some flowers, another one of these monstrous thymes. I have 2 thyme plants that are about 2 years old. They last all winter, and they'll flower in the spring, and then they just keep growing, and I just let them. Isn't that right, Ben? So planting throughout here will be a little interesting because I'm going to go around that stuff. I'm going to leave that. I'll leave these flowers since they're beautiful, and I'll plant my stuff around them. Of course, I'm going to give a whole bed over there to the cabbages and the cauliflower and the broccoli, and then probably those cabbages and cauliflower and broccoli are going to be over in these spaces as well. Other things that I'll be planting is kale, but I'll show you where I'm going to put that. And I've got some celtis and some lettuces, and then of course I mentioned the roots. And the way that this is gonna be is we're gonna have those cole crops, the cabbages, the broccolis, the cauliflowers, and the kale. And they'll be, you know, in rows, and then in these spaces that I have to kind of like get creative, like working around this thyme plant, this is where I'm planning on putting those roots in and just kind of planting them around those things. It's not gonna be super neat, but my idea is to fill up blocks of the bed with certain things. For instance, the way I'm envisioning this is maybe like from this stump to here, all the way down and around this will be like a certain kind of turnip. And then I'll go from the next one down and have a certain kind of beet or whatever. Basically, I just want to fill up the whole bed with those things in blocks instead of trying to do rows. Oh, that's a mess. We'll get over there. I've got a few okra plants here that actually volunteered from some last year. I let them grow, so that's kind of cool, getting some more okra. And a few pepper plants that are pretty puny. Probably gonna go ahead and clear this out down here to plant. On this side of this arch, we've already put some squash in, and I am doing like a second wave of some summer squashes. And I'm gonna actually be filling kind of these areas in with some summer squashes. I really weighed this out because with these little short beds that have the arches over them, with the fact that I'm planting frost tender things on the arches and then leaving these zinnias and peppers and then filling it in with things like squash, that means that when the frost comes, these beds are going to be empty. There's going to be nothing alive in them, which I don't like that. But the reason why I'm not putting those things in the long beds instead is because we're going to be building those row covers. And so I would really like to use that space for stuff that can handle a little bit of cold. Because like the row covers, they're not going to work like a greenhouse. It's just a little bit of cover. The things that I'm planting under them, those brassicas, those cole crops, I mean, they can handle it getting down to like 20 degrees Fahrenheit or even colder. So the row cover is really just shielding them from the really intense cold, shielding them from the wind, and extending the season a little bit with those things that can handle the cold. Row covers aren't going to do any good for things that die at freezing temperatures, so there's no sense in me wasting the space underneath those for things like squash. Over here, some more space that'll be emptied out. Now here in this bed, we've got several things coming up. That's some okra. Here's some basil sprouts. A lot of things volunteering, and some of these I'll probably just let them go. And here is the great tangly mess of snake beans, which mixed into this tangle. Here is an eggplant and some tiny little marigold. No, these are zinnias. Look at those little guys. Aren't those pretty? They're like mini, and it's a massive tangle. Also growing on this trellis is a banana melon, which ended up here somehow from last year because that's what was growing here. Now the snake beans, they are definitely different flavor-wise. They do have a really, what I consider a strange smell.
No.
What is it?
They don't smell like a key.
What do they smell like, Ben?
They smell like a key.
They smell like a key?
Yeah. They smell like candy.
They smell like a key, Daddy.
A key?
I don't get candy from that, Ezra. I don't know where you're getting that. I agree with Benjamin. Maybe they smell like a key. Whatever that smells like. I'm sure to a lot of people it's not strange. The thing I ran into with the snake beans is whenever I was looking for recipes for them, I was finding lots and lots of like Indian recipes, curry and stuff like that. And I'm actually not a super picky eater. I'll try anything. But I did go to India once, a couple years ago, and I got very, very sick. In India, decided that I didn't much care for Indian food. I loved India. I loved the Indian people. I found it to be one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and I can't wait to go back. But I don't cook Indian food, really. And so I've not like fallen in love with the snake bean as far as eating it. But man, it sure is neat to grow. If I were going to grow things just for the sake of having them growing, I would definitely grow this again. However, I probably won't because, you know, I do want to grow my own food, so I don't give up a lot of space just for the sake of growing things. However, check these out. So kind of what happens is they start out like this. This is a young one. And what I found is the one thing I haven't tried with these is frying them. Somebody did mention that. But I haven't been eating a lot of fried food. But someone said dicing them up and frying them when they're really small like this was good. So this is kind of the size that you're gonna pick these to eat. Maybe a little bit bigger than this. Maybe like this here. They're still pretty soft here. But they very, very quickly get huge, like this. This is like probably 4 feet long. And then they begin to turn orange. So here's that stage, which is just bizarre looking the way that the orange comes on. And when the orange comes on, they get really, really soft. And at first they feel kind of fluid filled. Like these feel like they have liquid in them. And then when they get really big, it starts to dry out and they have kind of like a thin flesh that's dry, and then they kind of start to get weird. I haven't actually seen what's inside one of the really ripe ones yet, so I thought we might employ Sweet Maya to come over here and help us cut one of them open. So actually, I think we'll grab this one that is this one's like mostly dry inside, it feels like. And I'd like to grab one of these that feels kind of heavy and liquid filled, because I'd kind of like to know what's going on inside there. Oh, here's a really good example of about when you harvest them to eat. It's like probably like 12 to 18 inches, kind of curls up on the end, and it's still nice and soft. Okay, we want to grab this one and then maybe like this one and cut them open, okay? Oh look, there's okra coming up in the walkways. Okay, we're actually gonna come cut these over on the fence posts by the chickens so we can kind of just dump them off and let the chickens eat them when we're done. Opal is ready for the inspection to take place. Okay, so first the younger one, which feels like it has liquid in it to me. Okay.
It feels gross, I'll be honest. Like,
Ben says it smells like a key. Ooh.
It might have a key inside of it. Yeah, I know. Can I see?
Yeah. Oh, weird.
this feels like aliens.
What?
Check that out.
Mom and Dad, I found something.
Look at that. Are you gonna touch it?
No.
Oh, then come video so I can touch it. Oh, weird. So it is like really...
Well, there was a cow.
Oh, look at the seed. It's so weird.
Let me see.
I don't know, it kind of smells neat. I'm gonna taste it.
Oh, can I not? I can't watch that.
Gross.
Okay, the chickens like it.
Yeah, they're eating it. That doesn't mean we would like it.
It's delicious. It's super sweet. I swear.
I'm not trying that.
No, you have to try it.
Okay. No.
Come on. Ben, you want to try it? Look, Ben's going to try it. Okay. Okay, it's got a seed in it, so just suck the gel off the seed.
Yummy.
It tastes like fruit.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Cool.
No, please
I'm so
try
glad
it.
you're having this great experience. You remember the last time you told me to do this was a tomato, and that went horribly.
This is like super sweet. It tastes like fruit. I'm serious. It's so good. You must try it. Come on. You don't trust me?
That's not what I said.
I'm your best friend.
No, Ben,
the love of your
I
life.
wanted Ben to try it, and he dropped the other one.
Okay, I got that seed.
Just take one of the seeds.
This is disgusting.
No, it's not. I promise you. You're going to be so pleasantly surprised.
I'm not.
I'm going to grow snake beans next year. I said I wouldn't because they smell so weird, but now taste that.
Yummy. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. Put it this way. It doesn't taste bad. Texturally, it's a freaking nightmare. And visually, I mean, seriously, that leaves a lot to be desired. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I want people in the comments to look at this and then tell me how many of you would be like, oh yeah, pop it in your mouth, it'll be fine.
They would eat it. They're delicious.
I guarantee you there's people that are gonna comment that won't. Oh my gosh, woman. I mean, look, it's like you're eating brains. This is like out of a freaking sci-fi movie, like brain eating. The chickens, look, they're even like going crazy like velociraptors for it.
It's good.
Yeah, but
It's a weird thing to grow to eat this way though. I mean, like if you just gotta like suck the gel off of seeds.
Yeah, that's kind of a lot. But I mean, it's prolific. It grows tons of fruit.
No.
Do you want to crack open the other one?
Yes, I want to see what happens when they get bigger. It's really good.
Okay.
I wonder what the actual flesh tastes like.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
You think it's so good, Ben? All right, let's try it. Not as good. All right, now this one doesn't feel as like liquidy. It feels much more dry. I'm not really sure.
All right.
Let's see.
Same.
This one.
Bigger beans.
Yeah, I don't.
I have a bigger bean.
You wanna try it?
I have a bigger bean.
spit the seed out.
Does it still taste good?
Does it still taste good? No. Oh wow, it really doesn't.
Okay, so...
So at this size, it's not nearly as sweet.
I mean, that's kind of the normal process of things, right? The sweetness grows out.
It's not sweet at all.
Yeah.
When it's this big. It's weird tasting.
The chickens are loving this, man. Honestly, we should just grow this to feed to the chickens.
It's so neat looking when it grows. Yeah, so, okay, so the bigger one is more dried out. There's much less pulp around the seeds, and the pulp that is there is like not nearly as sweet.
Right.
Like that one, the younger one, it was very, very flavorful. It tasted very fruit-like, but this does not. This tastes real fibrous and no sweetness to it. Just like kind of a weird texture without a lot of saving grace. Now that is a mature seed right there. This is what the seeds looked like that I planted out of the seed package from Baker Creek. Whoa! Look at that. Maya, you know what this is?
Okra?
No, this is that amaranth. It's everywhere.
Oh, wait,
holy
yeah,
smokes.
Look at all the seeds that dropped.
Look at it. Wow. Yes, and finally down here on the end, my Chilaka melons
Hey Ben, here's a cucumber melon.
came to the show.
Yay.
That makes me so happy.
We'll actually get a decent harvest, it looks
Oh
like.
yeah, we'll get a great harvest off of these. They're looking great. They'll keep going till it gets cold. I am so tickled to learn that the pulp in those snake beans is sweet like fruit. That's just fantastic. I mean, totally awesome. I've been sitting here thinking, I really like these, at least looking at them, but I didn't love the way that they tasted young at all. But I could let them grow until they're orange and cut them open, and we can eat the pulp like fruit. That's a really great thing to grow. I'll totally grow snake beans again. I have a reason. All right, so I kind of jumped ahead there. Let's go back to where we were. Empty space. I'll fill this up with winter stuff. Here, this spinach, Malabar spinach, still going very strong. I'm gonna leave that alone and let it grow until it doesn't anymore. Here I've got some cowpeas that are pretty much ready to be shelled. They're kind of putting on a second wave here. And so those will still have to be harvested. Once they're done, we'll pull them out and replant. And then down here, this is pretty much empty space. Here are some cucumbers that are actually have reseeded, like one of them fell down on the trellis and reseeded. And I may let those grow. I haven't decided on that yet. And in this last bed, I'm gonna do much the same. The problem is that on these long beds, since we have producing trellises on them, I don't know that we're gonna be able to build the covers. I'm not 100% sure. I know we're gonna build them down there. We may build them down here. Because of not having that nailed down, my mindset is that I'm probably going to plant more things down here that will be okay without the cover. Probably more of those root vegetables that I can just mulch over and store in the ground, as well as things like collards, which do amazing down to very cold temperatures. And I think I'm gonna let that amaranth grow up some and just see how far it gets. That is a ton of amaranth. I mean, there are probably 150 plant starts here amongst the weeds. As you can see there, it's that red amaranth. Now these two beds here, these will have row covers. They have a few things in them right now finishing up. Some sunflower, some beans, which these actually have beans on them, so these we'll be picking here before too long. They're kind of puny looking. I do have some flowers and okra in here. I may go ahead and pull these out closer to the end, or I may let just a little bit of it stay. But these two beds are going to be my kale beds. So they will be mostly emptied, and I'm going to fill these up entirely with kale. Did you get a melon? And I may also still plant some kale in the other beds if I have some extra space that I need to use, but I definitely want to do these two beds. Now this is a 22-foot bed and a 26-foot bed. So I'm going to just completely fill them up with different varieties of kale, because we use a lot of that, and we'll definitely use it throughout the winter. And these will definitely have the floating row covers over these beds. You're a little garden boy. I still have some peppers here in these bags. They're kind of petering out. And I've got a couple of little plants that can probably go in the house once it gets cold. Obviously there's still quite a bit going on out here, but there's also still quite a lot of space to fill. Now when replanting this space, my number one priority is going to be the things that I know that we use a lot of. We will use a lot of kale, a lot of carrots, turnips, and beets, radishes. We'll use a lot of those things into the winter. Also cabbage, for making sauerkraut and just eating plain. We can go through a lot of cabbage. And then cauliflower and broccoli is something that we really, really enjoy and I'm able to do a lot of things with. So that's kind of my first priority. Now, I have in the past grown green beans quite a lot in my fall garden, and that's kind of in the back of my mind. I could go ahead and plant another wave of green beans and I could probably get a harvest off of them. Green beans take about 45 to 55 days, maybe a little on the longer end of that since it's fall and we have less light. But I am thinking I really want to focus on the things that are going to extend past the frost, which green beans is not one of those things. So yeah, I'll have to decide on that pretty soon or I'll miss the window, but I'm not decided yet. So what are your thoughts about the floating row covers? Do you have kind of a plan for how you're going to do that? I have a general idea of what materials you use, but I haven't actually like watched the how-to videos from some of the other channels that, you know, we're friends with or we watch to kind of get exact information. But I'm going to nail that down when we get back from Santa Rosa and kind of just, I guess we got to order stuff. Yeah, we'll have to order some stuff, and then, you know, honestly, I'll probably modify it just because, we're putting it on raised beds. Putting it on raised beds is one, and two, you know, I like to try and figure things out, you know. It may be that what they do is exactly what we need, but I may look at it and look at what we need and change it up some, I don't know. The floating row covers are kind of a game changer. Last year I actually grew through the winter in our garden, and I grew a lot of things and actually was able to harvest quite a lot of things like kale and broccoli, even through the cold weather. But it was a really mild winter, and I don't think this winter is going to be so mild. So I'd like to be prepared. With the floating row covers, I believe we'll be able to get most of those brassicas through the entire winter. They'll grow slow, but starting them now, I've got several things started in the house, they'll be established enough by the time the days shorten that, you know, even though they're growing slow, they'll still be out here growing and living, where we can still come and pick fresh food out of the garden through the winter, which is really important to me. The wonderful thing that happens too with these things that we're talking about being cold weather crops, things like root vegetables and brassicas, the flavor of them is so much better in the cold. Like root vegetables, they store a lot of their sugars in their roots whenever it's cold, because that's how this plant is basically combating the cold temperatures. And if you have grown those things in the spring or summer and did not care for them, growing them in the cold weather, it's just a completely different experience. They taste so much better. So I'm really looking forward to filling up the whole garden. We want to fill all the garden beds for this winter. And I think that's going to be really awesome. So I look forward to sharing it with you guys, and I appreciate you hanging out with me today. We bless you. Until next time.